Thanks everybody so much for being here at the Caring Conference. Our next presenter is Elizabeth, and she's going to help us with our courageous conversation. So Elizabeth, take it away.
Awesome. Good morning, everybody. You can't see my caregiver shirt very well on Zoom, but I'm sporting the caregiver t-shirt today from an amazing family caregiver. I love it when they make their products so we can help support small businesses. So today I'm talking about how to have a courageous conversation with those that you love. This is sometimes not a fun topic. And basically, I want to share with you that I've cared for both of my parents and I've cared for my mother-in-law. They have all since deceased. And now I'm currently supporting my older sister, who's a primary caregiver for my brother. And he has a developmental disability. So I'm a long distance caregiver, and I'd love to connect with y'all on LinkedIn. So what is a courageous conversation? It is basically it's an unwanted conversation. It's a tough dialogue between two or more people. You'd rather not have it. It makes you get out of your comfort zone, but it's really, really necessary to have it because it's awkward, it's uncomfortable, but the outcome is going to be amazing. And I would call this a emotional self-care, because I think a lot of times we put a lot of emphasis on physical self-care and other types of self-care, but this is really how you cope as a family caregiver with emotional self-care. So topics that can feel uncomfortable. It could be your caree's living situation. Maybe they can no longer live independently on their own. I know for my situation, independent living with my parents was a hot topic. And I compare it to it was like wading in the ocean. When their health was status quo, it was working. It was working and life was doable. But as soon as that big unexpected wave came and crashed in, it would topple over them and it would have a ripple effect on my entire family. I'm one of 6 kids. And so we would all be scrambling to figure it out. It's difficult to have these conversations, particularly with those people who wipe your bottom when you're young, because they can view it as disrespectful. Some of the other topics that could be a courageous conversation is your personal hygiene or their personal hygiene. You're starting to smell, or maybe they're having accidents or wearing clothes too often. Driving was something we had to encounter with my mother-in-law, and she was driving and she shouldn't have been driving. And that was another conversation we had to have, my husband and I, with her. Complying with medication and following the doctor's orders. End of life wishes. People are just uncomfortable talking about death, although I'm excited to see that there's this thing called a death positive movement, because it would be great to have more of those conversations long before you need to have them. And then as a family caregiver, a courageous conversation is really defining and asking for the help that you truly need, because nobody is good at reading minds. And so we have to be real courageous about saying what is going to feel like help and support for us. So I'd love for you all to get into the chat and tell me something about yourself. This is a prompt from the my Just For You Daily Self-Care Journal. And so it says, what courageous, difficult conversation do you need to have right now with somebody that you care about? So I'm going to hold there for a minute and wait for a couple of responses. I guess it would help if I pulled up the chat. There we go. So I see the need to stop driving from Sade, or I don't know if I'm saying your name right, Sade. Candace, dad, end of life. Oh, Shade, thank you. Same as Candace. So there's some repeats here. End of life choices. And keep adding them. Vaccinations. Yeah, that's a hot topic. And those boosters and everything that goes along with that. Mother-in-law stepped away from supporting the family, what my husband wanted for his death, and to help him through that process. So you guys get it. You know what a courageous conversation is, clearly, from what you're putting in your chat. So and feel free to keep those going. So just writing that in the chat took courage. And so I'd love to give you all a giveaway. So the first responder, I think it was Shade. Denise, help me with that maybe, is she wins a free Just For You daily self-care journal. So direct message Denise your mailing address and I will ship that out to you. So congrats for taking courage.
Yeah, Sade. And we'll actually I'll keep adding names to our spreadsheet. So
perfect.
Be in touch.
So let's pause here for a minute and say, what might your day look like and feel like, more importantly, if your ex, whatever it was that you were thinking about, was resolved? Maybe we'd be breathing better. Maybe we would sleep better. Maybe we would just be able to be in that moment with a transitioning caregiver and know that we could just be with our loved one when they're transitioning rather than scrambling around trying to figure out what they would want to be true at their end of life stage. So think about what it might look like, because it's important, because that's going to like be your impetus for like having the conversation. So why must we dig for the courage? And we're digging all the time. Y'all are amazing. But you need to have them because the risks of not having them far outweigh the discomfort for having the conversation. So here are some of the topics that we spoke about earlier, and then some of the risks that can happen. You know, we could be looking at falls and hospitalizations. We could be looking at COVID-19 and even death, you know, potentially without getting the vaccination that someone mentioned. Loss of companionship and dignity with the personal hygiene. Death, again, potentially with driving, death of ourselves, death of an innocent bystander that's just driving down the street. Companionship and death with medication compliance. So there's definitely a death theme here. Sorry. But there's, you know, a lot of things, family arguments happen, you know, end of life wishes, or God forbid you do something that they would never have wanted to happen in the first place. And then asking for the help you need as a family caregiver, you know, that it breeds resentment when you don't ask for the help that you need. It affects your relationships. You start burning out and you have unhealthy habits, maybe addiction things that are starting to happen, and just impacts your mental and your physical health overall. So there's a metaphor for tackling this most challenging task or this courageous conversation, and there's a book about it called Eat That Frog. Because it is it's procrastination that's kind of getting in our way. So eat the frog, have the courageous conversation is what I'm hoping that I'm just going to inspire you to do today. So when did someone have a courageous conversation with you? Think about that for a moment, and what made it effective? There could be an S after courageous conversations. But for me, you know, being vulnerable here, probably 18 or so years ago, I was having like mini panic attacks. You know, there was just a lot going on. And my husband, Jason, was concerned with my health. And he really, you know, not in the heat of the moment, but he sat down with me and talked that we needed, you know, it's probably time that I needed to see a doctor, that, you know, he knows me well. I trust his opinion about my behavior. It was calm. It was not in the heat of the moment. It was an act of love. He was sharing how it was impacting his life and how the life of my kids. And he offered a suggestion of going to see a professional. And he was committed to help me with it. And so when I reflect on that, that's what helped make it effective for me. And so potentially that's what can help you, you know, put those ingredients into your conversation because of what made it effective for an example that you had. So I like to start with the don'ts. The don'ts for not having a courageous conversation, in my opinion, I would say, is to avoid the heated moment. It's not going to be productive. You want to have a relaxed, neutral, non-threatening environment. So a public location, probably not a great spot for a courageous conversation. Keep the group small and intimate with the people who really care about the outcome of this. If it does get to be an unproductive conversation where it's just, you know, and you know what those are, the yelling, the, you know, you this and defensiveness happening, just put a stop to it. Don't continue it. It's not the right time. And then not everything is a courageous conversation, you know, pick your battles type of thing. No, you know, is there really a big risk here with having this conversation? Or is this just something that, you would really wish to be true. We're dealing in most cases with adults here, and so not everything is a courageous conversation. They have free will to live their life. And then I would also just add, don't make promises, particularly when it talks about like living situations. Don't make promises that you might be able to not keep. Parenting my kids, I always used to say, we'll see, and just don't, the word promise, use that very, very sparingly, because there's just so much of unknowns, and none of us have a crystal ball of what that looks like. So the do's for a courageous conversation: start it with love. Kind of start it with love, end it with love. Have those be the bookends of your conversation. Our objective here is to create an environment of understanding and to gain comfort talking about sensitive things. And the love shows that we're on the same side. This is a partnership. This is not, us against them kind of thing, ganging up on somebody. And, have some compassion, put yourself in their shoes. Think about what you would want to have, what it would feel like to be in their situation, to lose your independence potentially of driving or living somewhere, or having someone feeling like someone's always telling you what to do. And address their concerns. There's so many myths and stigmas about things. Think just maybe their approach to this conversation is something that's not based on facts, and so you just kind of want to really find out what their fears are and address their concerns and listen intently. I would say plan for it, whether you make some bullet points or you want to write out a full-blown letter, if you feel comfortable with that. That can just kind of organize and help you process the situation. That could be a tool that would be easy for you. Definitely think about it in advance, though, and have some bullets at a minimum, I would say. You could practice it with someone in your trusted circle. Hey, I'm thinking, this is a trusted circle, all of these folks here. I'm thinking of having this. This is what I'm dealing with. This is what I'm thinking of saying. A lot of the certified caregiving consultants offer complimentary coaching sessions. That might be a way that you could practice it with somebody. Talk about what's going well, the positive reinforcement, what is working, that related to this situation, what you like seeing, and maybe not in the conversation, but in the build up to it. Like, oh, wow, you smell really good today. I can see you're fresh and you're shining and glowing, or whatever it is that you could state that's in a positive light. You want to include specific examples of the risks and the impacts of the things that we mentioned, earlier. And some of those things might be impacts to your health. I know for me, the living situation for my parents was making me anxious. It was keeping me up at night. It was making me miss my kids' milestone events and holidays. So it's, there's a ripple effect to these things. And, be vulnerable and clear on your boundaries. Maybe there's some hard boundaries of where you're willing to compromise, and a compromise I can think of is my mom was not super compliant with her breathing treatment. She had COPD, and she would fight us all the time about, we would help her get it on. And then as soon as someone turned their back, she'd take it off. And I think a lot of times she would doze off, and it was kind of not on purpose. And she just felt like she had it on long enough. And so what we did to fix that was we found this compromise where we used an iPad or an iPhone and set a 10-minute timer. And that allowed us to, not have the nagging back and forth, but be able to make sure she was getting her full dose. So what are you willing to do? What are you not willing to do is important. Using your I language. So when we use you, when we're talking, when you say I, people can't take away your feelings of how you feel, and they can help lead to negotiations and sharing. Whereas you statements can help create this defensiveness and this kind of battle or war. So some examples of some I language might be, I've noticed that you're less steady on your feet, and I'm worried that you're going to fall. That's so much better than scolding them. Hey, you should use your walker, or you should use your cane. Or another one might be, when you don't talk to me about how you're feeling, it hurts me, and I don't know how I can help you better. That's more effective than you never talk to me. So you can kind of hear the difference there. Open-ended questions are great to kind of get to that, to help get to the progress, ditching this all or nothing mentality. Let's take the driving example for as an example. Maybe there's a compromise there where, not driving at night, not driving on the highways, not driving by yourself, not driving a certain car that's hard to get in and out of. So maybe there's some wiggle room on some of these conversations. And so how you can brainstorm that would be, give me your ideas on how you think this transition can best be handled, and then shut up and listen. So, write the things down so that you're listening and that it's important to you. Someone's going to see that, like, oh, they care about me. They're writing my ideas down. I'm not just like falling on deaf ears here. And then sometimes you got to enlist a third party. A suggested test or a trial basis is a great thing. Like, I know sometimes it could be like, hey, let's try, my cousin did this with her dad, is she really wanted him to get into a respite situation after her mom passed because he was just spiraling. And she said, Dad, let's just try to, go into this assisted living. His mom lived there as well. You can have lunch with your mom and breakfast with your mom, and we're going to try it for 30 days, can bring the dog, and we'll see how it works. That might be an option. And then enlisting the help of a third party. So third party could be a family physician, a social worker, a counselor, a geriatric care manager. Sometimes it's just you need that other person that can help with the conversation. And then end the conversation with love, as we spoke about earlier. When all else fails, and it might, but it probably will take multiple conversations. You've planted seeds. You've let it all out there. You've gotten everything off your chest. You've given it your all. It's a process. But they got to meet you halfway. Your care's got to meet you halfway. And again, a lot of times we're dealing with mutual adults here. They're adults. And for the most part, they can make their own decisions. So sometimes we got to learn to let go. And it's really, really hard. And Denise talked about letting go earlier, and Gina talked about setting the boundaries. All of that is related to having these conversations. I put a couple of things in there that have helped me learn how to let go. One of them is the loving kindness prayer. May you be well, may you be happy, may you be peaceful, may you be loved. And then the other one is serenity prayer. Great way to end the day. It's like, give it my all, and there's so much that's out of our control in this caregiving world. So Denise put this in the spreadsheet, but I've got an affirmation poster for you. One of the affirmations is, you are courageous. You perform procedures with little to no training. You explored new alternatives. You face your worst fears head on. So I thought this could be something that you could post and know that you are showing up and you are affirmed and you are courageous as a caregiver. And then last but not least, I know we're going to give away a couple other journals in the session, but if you wanted one, this is a link to that with a coupon code. And then I don't know if we have time for questions. I'm a fast talker.
We've got 5 minutes, so please feel free to ask any questions that you have in the chat room.
I'll look at the chat here.
Yeah, we've got lots of great conversation in the chat room. I know that these conversations are so difficult, and I think it was Patty who said that they do take practice, and the more you do them, I think the more courage you have to do them. I'm not sure that the conversations ever feel like it's easier, but I just feel like you get into the habit of just putting it out there.
Yeah, you don't pontificate about them maybe as long. You're just going in. Denise, while we're waiting for a question, do you have examples of when you've had to have a courageous conversation?
I have had courageous conversations with my parents for decades.
You're a master at it.
And I will say, and it really goes back to what Patty has shared in the chat room, that the more you practice, the more you think, okay, I'm going to just do it. You just dive into the deep end. And I think something that also is a theme for today is expectations that we have, and letting go of expectations and just focusing on what's my approach right now. What are my good questions? How do I maintain my composure? How do I stay calm? And that way the expectation is what we can control, which is, what am I bringing into this conversation? we are in the midst of having conversations with my dad about driving. He had a terrible fall 2.5 weeks ago. And that to me is the indication that it's time. And he is not of that belief. So he's 90 and he never was a good driver. I hate to say this, but I mean, it was always, we're getting in the car with dad, even when we were kids. So he doesn't have a track record of someone that you feel really confident about having a driver.
One thing that finally worked for Jason's mom on the driving end is she got a flat tire and she didn't have the energy or the will to figure out how to get it fixed. Maybe there's some nails that need to be sprinkled in the, the parking lot. But one of the courageous conversations that my sister and I are brainstorming right now, and if you guys have advice, I'd love to hear it, or is with my brother who's got the developmental disability. He has a little bit of like entitlement and like lack of gratitude. And so an example is he loves to play bingo. He wore his bingo hat and bingo everything to a Halloween party lately, but he wears it all the time. But he wore it to the Halloween party. They gave him third prize because they know him, and I'm sure they thought they were doing a great thing. And he like had a tantrum about not getting first place. And my sister has tried repeatedly to talk to him about gratitude and, you know, kindness. And, you know, he's 58 years old, 59. And so this is, you know, years of stuff, but he can be unkind on social media. He can be just unkind, and it's hard to figure out how to have the conversation where it's helping to change the behavior. We're going to keep at it.
Yeah, that's a tough one, especially because you see and feel the impact.
Oh, some places he's not allowed to go back. I mean, some places we've had, you know, it's turned into a big scene. Like it's hard.
It's
a very different caregiving experience than caring for aging parents. So
yeah,
you get a different taste of everything.
Yeah, that's really tough. And it's a frustrating, it's heartbreaking, and it just feels almost in a situation where you can feel powerless to it.
Yeah.
It's so difficult.
And there's few resources. I feel like he's kind of in the middle. He's high functioning, you know, so it's like there's not a lot of resources there is what I'm finding. So could be future focused, but I've enjoyed this time with you all in this caring conference, and I look forward to celebrating you all and your courageous acts. So thank you.
And I just want to mention something, Elizabeth, and that's why it's so important that we really are respectful of all the relationships around caregiving, that sometimes we are caring for someone who may not feel like a loved one, simply because the behaviors can be so difficult. And it's important when we're out in the world talking about caregiving that we use the words that reflect that sometimes it's not a loved one for whom we care. People would say to me on a regular basis, oh, you love your parents, which is why you care for them. And I would respond, I love myself, which is why I'm in a caregiving experience, because I know I couldn't sleep at night if I didn't help. It's love for self. I think that's important too, to keep that equation. Okay, I think we're good. Okay, thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Thanks everybody for sharing in the chat room. So appreciate all that you're sharing and all that you're adding to our conference today. We're going to take a 10-minute break, and then we're going to come back in 10 minutes for our next presentation.